Hello, amazing children. This is Grandma Carla, and I am back with another chapter of Beverly Cleary's Henry and the Clubhouse. We're on Chapter 3, Trick or Treat. Henry Huggins was sure that this year he had thought up a better Halloween costume than anyone else in the neighborhood. No tramp or clown suit, not for Henry. He had thought up something different, something that no one else would think of, not in a million years. There was just one flaw in Henry's anticipation of Halloween. He still had not sold the new neighbor a journal subscription, and although Mr. Caper had not mentioned the matter, Henry knew the district manager was waiting for him to say something about it. But what could Henry say? Every time he tried to approach the house, Ranger chased him away. How the other journal carriers, especially those in the 8th grade and the high school, would laugh at that. Henry was particularly worried because his father knew Mr. Caper, and if the two men happened to run into each other, Mr. Huggins would probably say, "How's Henry getting along on the route?" And Mr. Caper would answer, "He delivers the papers all right, but he is a terrible salesman." Mr. Caper always said that there were 3 parts to a carrier's job: delivering, collecting, and selling. Then his father would say, "No more work on the clubhouse." He might even tell the boys to tear down the frame which they had already so carefully built. After supper on Halloween, Henry tried to shove all this into the back of his mind. It was time to get ready to go trick-or-treating, a time for fun, not a time to think about his troubles. Henry went to his room and shut the door. He got out a bottle of ink, washable, it said on the label, and he hoped the label knew what it was talking about, and an old lipstick of his mother's. He went to work and applied war paint to his face. When he finished, he did not need a Halloween mask from the dime store like the ones the rest of the boys and the girls would wear. No one would guess it was Henry Huggins under the lines and circles he had drawn on his face. Then he fastened an old belt around his head, and through it stuck a feather from one of his mother's old hats. Next, he draped an Indian blanket across his shoulders and fastened it with safety pins, lots of them. He needed his hands free to carry the paper bag for all the treats that he would collect that evening. Henry studied himself in the mirror and was pleased with what he saw. A fierce Indian that no one would ever guess really Henry Huggins. But the best part of his costume was still to come. Henry opened his bedroom door. "Here, Ribsy," he called. "Come on, boy." Obediently, Ribsy trotted down the hall and into Henry's bedroom. Henry opened a bureau drawer and took out a rubber wolf mask, which he slipped over Ribsy's head. There, his costume was complete. He was now an Indian, accompanied by a wolf. A funny-looking black and white and brown spotted wolf, it was true. But from the neck up, Ribsy was a wolfish-looking wolf, with long white fangs and a bright red tongue. It was certain be lucky for Henry if he and Ribsy happened to meet Ranger. Boy, oh, Ranger would take one look at Ribsy the wolf and practically turn a backward somersault. He would be so surprised and scared. Then he would tuck his tail between his legs and run for home as fast as he could, with Ribsy the wolf right after him. By the time Ribsy got through with him, old Ranger would have learned which dog was boss in this neighborhood. Unfortunately, this, as was so often the case, this good idea of Henry's had a flaw. With a rubber mask over his head, Ribsy could not have a chance if he got into a dog fight because he would not be able to bite back. With Ranger, he probably would not have a chance without a mask. It would be wisest for Henry to stay away from the new neighbor's house that evening. He did not mind. Halloween was no time to sell a newspaper subscription. Ribsy sat down and scratched. "Hey, cut that out," ordered Ribsy. "You'll tear the mask." Henry went out to show off his costume to his mother and father. Mr. Huggins laughed, and Mrs. Huggins pretended to be frightened at seeing the Indian and a wolf in the house. Nosy, the cat, was really frightened. He fluffed up his tail and jumped to the back of the couch, where he arched his back and kept a wary eye on the wolf. "Do you think Ribsy is going to stand for that mask very long?" said Mrs. Huggins. "I think so," said Henry as he opened the front door. "We've practiced in my room every day this week. When I finished my route, I came home and put the mask on him. He seemed sort of puzzled at first, but he's used to it now. I held him up so that he could see himself in the mirror, and I think he likes it." It was a perfect night for Halloween. The stars were bright, and a north wind sent leaves skittering along the pavement. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned in front of the windows. Bands of boys and girls, some of them wearing costumes that glowed in the dark, trooped from door to door. Mothers of small children lurked in the shrubbery, while their little rabbits or ghosts climbed steps and rang doorbells. Henry felt so good he did a war dance in the middle of his front lawn before he started down the street. Before Henry had had time to ring a doorbell, he met a boy wearing a green cardboard head intended to look like the head of a man from outer space. Suddenly, the outer space man's eyes lit up in a fiendish and scary way that made Henry suspect his friend Murph must be inside. Murph was the only boy in the neighborhood who knew enough about electricity to think up such a costume. Henry raised his hand in an Indian salute. "How," he said, carefully disguising his voice. Silently, the spaceman held out his hand. Henry grasped it. "Yipe!" he yelled in his own voice, because he was grasping a buzzer that Murph held in the palm of his hand. Murph laughed. "I thought it was you under that war paint." He leaned over and patted Ribsy. "Hiya, Wolf," he said. "I knew who you were by your spots." Together the boys proceeded down Klickitat Street, ringing doorbells and shouting, "Trick or treat!" Everyone laughed at Ribsy's costume and gave Henry an extra treat for his wolf. Gradually their bags grew fat with candy, peanuts, popcorn balls, individual boxes of raisins, apples, and bubblegum. The boys no longer stopped at every house. They compared notes with other trick-or-treaters and soon learned which people gave jelly beans or all-day suckers. These houses they skipped. They did not like jelly beans, and Henry felt that a boy who had a paper route was just too grown up to lick a sucker. At one house, which was completely dark, Henry and Murph hesitated. "Should we bother?" asked Henry. "It doesn't look as if the Morgans are home." "We might as well skip it," said Murph, and just then a car turned into the driveway and drove into the garage. The headlights revealed a garage cluttered with tools and books and decorated with collection of old license plates. On a shelf at the back, a stuffed owl with wings outstretched and claws poised for attack stared glassily into the night. "Come on," said Henry as Mrs. Morgan got out of the car. "She's got a lot of bags in back. Maybe she just bought something good at the market." The two boys and Ribsy walked up the driveway. "Trick or treat!" shouted Henry and Murph. Murph pressed the button that lit up his outer space head. "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Morgan exclaimed, turning around. "An Indian and a man from space, and a wolf! You certainly startled me." Then she hesitated. "Well, I'm afraid you will have to go ahead and play a trick." She peered into the paper bags in the back seat. "I've just come from the market, but all I bought was detergent and coffee and cat food and some things for breakfast. I don't have a thing to treat you with." This was awkward. Henry could not recall a Halloween when he had not been treated by everyone. Why, some of the younger children in the neighborhood did not know that trick or treat meant they were supposed to play a trick if they were not given a treat. Neither Henry nor Murph was prepared to play a trick. They had not even brought a piece of soap for soaping windows. "Ah, that's all right, Mrs. Morgan," said Henry. After all, she was a very nice lady and one of the Journal customers. "Why, it's Henry Huggins," exclaimed Mrs. Morgan. "I didn't recognize you in all that war paint." Naturally, Henry was pleased that his neighbor had not penetrated his disguise. "That's a keen owl you have there," he remarked. It's real fierce looking, as if it was about to catch an animal or something." "It's a great horned owl," said Murph, whose head was full of information like this. "Those license plates go all the way back to 1929. Mr. Morgan always nails the old plates on the wall every time he gets a new one." Mrs. Morgan followed Henry's eyes to the owl. "Henry, since I don't have a treat for you, how would you like to have the owl?" she asked if she had just had an inspiration. "Gee, Mrs. Morgan," Henry was almost speechless. He was so busy considering the possibilities of a stuffed owl. In his room, on his closet of drawers, or in the clubhouse. That was it. In the clubhouse, a stuffed owl was exactly what they needed for a finishing touch. "Gee, could I really have it?" "Certainly," said Mrs. Morgan. "You boys just climb up on that apple box and lift it down." The boys quickly obeyed before Mrs. Morgan could change her mind. Henry could scarcely believe his good fortune. The owl was at least 5 feet from wingtip to wingtip. Why, this was better than all the peanuts and the popcorn balls in the world. "Thanks, Mrs. Morgan," said Henry. "Thanks a lot." "Oh, don't thank me," said Mrs. Morgan. "I've been looking for a way to get rid of that thing for years. It's too big to go into the garbage can, and the Goodwill refused to take it." "Are you going to put it in the clubhouse?" asked Murph, when the boys had left Mrs. Morgan's garage. "Sure," said Henry. "Then we can call it a hunting lodge." "Nobody hunts owls," Murph pointed out. Henry could see no reason for continuing the rounds of the neighborhood. Nothing he would get could possibly be as good as a stuffed owl. Besides, carrying his paper bag and lugging the owl, which was an awkward size and shape, did not leave him a free hand for ringing doorbells. On their way home, Henry and Murph met a gypsy and a small red devil who turned out to be Beezus and, appropriately, Henry felt, Ramona. They were carrying a jack-o'-lantern that had been carved too long before Halloween. Now it had lips that were shriveling, and there was the smell of cooking pumpkin in the air. "A stuffed owl!" exclaimed Beezus. "How spooky! What are you going to do with that?" "Put it in the clubhouse," said Henry, "but no girls allowed." Henry really would not have minded Beezus visiting the clubhouse, but Murph had been firm from the beginning. No girls allowed, and perhaps Murph was right. A boy who was in the business of delivering papers was too old to play with girls. Before Beezus could answer, Ramona held up her paper bag. "We each got a nutsy," she said, and began to recite. "Nutsies give both children and adults quick energy. Avoid that mid-afternoon slump with a nutsy chock full of protein-rich nuts." "Jeepers," said Henry. "What does she do? Memorize commercials?" "Oh, Ramona," said Beezus impatiently, "stop reciting commercials. You don't have to believe things just because you hear them on TV." Then she turned to Henry and Murph. "Stay away from that house on the corner," she advised. "When we said trick or treat, they said they would like to see us do a trick for them. And why didn't we sing a little song? I guess they don't understand about Halloween." "I sang a little song," boasted Ramona, twitching her red devil's tail. "I sang, 'Crispy potato chips are the best, north or south, east or west. Crispy chips, hooray, hooray, get your crispy chips today.'" "And the people thought it was cute," said Beezus crossly. "They asked her to do it again each time." "That is a nice song," said Ramona. "I like it." While they were standing under the streetlight, Scooter McCarthy appeared out of the darkness. He was wearing his father's old Marine uniform, without even a mask, and was licking a candy apple. "Hey, where did you get the owl?" he asked. "Mrs. Morgan," answered Henry, who suspected Scooter of wanting to let everyone know that his father had been a Marine. Scooter looked closer. "Sort of beat up, but not bad," he conceded. "Where did you get the candy apple?" asked Murph. "That house where the people moved in last week." "What are we waiting for?" Murph asked Henry. "Come on, let's get some candy apples." "Oh, I don't know." Henry did not think he cared to meet Ranger when he was wearing an Indian blanket and carrying a stuffed owl. He might trip if he tried to run. There was Ribsy to think of, too. Henry did not want his dog to get in another fight with Ranger. "Henry is scared of their dog," said Scooter. "I am not," said Henry indignantly. "Then why do you let him chase you every day?" asked Scooter. Henry wondered how Scooter knew about this. "Come on, Murph, let's go ring the new lady's doorbell." Henry spoke with more assurance than he felt. He only hoped that the dog would feel more friendly toward him when he was not delivering papers, and perhaps would not even recognize him in his war paint. Ranger would probably be in the house in a way. And anyway, Henry was not going to be pushed around by a dog. If his owner was giving out candy apples, Henry was going to have a candy apple. If the worst came to worst, he could use the owl to fend off Ranger. He also had the happy thought that it might be pretty hard for Ranger to bite him through the folds of the blanket. "Sit, Ribsy," Henry ordered when they were in front of the house. To be on the safe side, he pulled off the rubber wolf mask. "Sit," he said again. For once, Ribsy sat. Probably he was no more eager to meet Ranger than Henry was. As the boys advanced toward the front steps, Henry noted that the wind was blowing his scent away from the house. He also thought that since he was disguised with war paint, the lady would not recognize him as the boy whose friend had told her that only she could prevent forest fires. That was a good thing. "You ring," he said to Murph as he rested his bag of treats in front of his feet and held the owl in his left hand. This left his right hand free to accept the candy apple. Murph turned on his outer space eyes and rang the doorbell while Henry braced himself. The door opened and the new owner, the one to whom Henry was so anxious to sell the journal, appeared. "Oh," she clapped her hands to her chest and stepped back, pretending great fright. "Trick or treat," shouted Henry and Murph, who could not help being pleased by her performance. Henry was glad that the lady could not possibly recognize him. Ranger, who was trotting toward the door, saw the owl with its outstretched wings, sharp claws, and glittering eyes, looked at it and looking as if it was about to attack. He skidded to a stop on the hardwood floor, turned, and tried to run, but his claws could not dig into the slippery wood. He slipped and skidded to the edge of the carpet where his claws could take hold. He slunk under the chair, whimpering with fright. Old Ranger wasn't so brave after all, Henry thought, as he heard a growl behind him in the dark. Now that Ranger had turned tail, Ribsy was ready to protect his master. "Go home," Henry ordered, even though he could not see Ribsy. The lady bent over and looked under the chair. "What's the matter with Ranger?" she asked. "What's the matter with the boy? Come on out, baby. It's just a stuffed owl. It can't hurt you." Baby. The lady called that ferocious animal baby. Henry heard the jingle of license tags behind him. He noticed that Ranger had heard them too. Henry wished he had not bothered with the candy apple when he had already had a whole bag full of things his mother would not want him to eat. At that moment, Ribsy poked his head around the door. "Why, it's that dog that got into the fight with Ranger," exclaimed the lady, holding out a tray of candy apples to Henry. "And you must be the paper boy." Henry accepted the apple. "Oh, yes," he admitted. Now that his disguise had been penetrated, he used his foot to give Ribsy a shove down the steps. I'm so sorry about the fight and what Ramona said about not causing forest fires." "Oh, children and pets," said the lady with an airy laugh. "You never can tell what little children are going to say, and I've had lots of pets, and they are always into something. Don't worry about the little girl, and please don't worry about Ranger. He'll get over it." Suddenly, a word the woman had spoken repeated itself in Henry's mind. Pets. She was interested in pets. He looked at Ranger whimpering under the chair, steadied his owl, and decided to speak up. Now that the lady knew who he was, he had nothing to lose, and somehow he had a feeling it would be easier when he was disguised as an Indian. It was almost as if someone else was speaking instead of Henry. "My name is Henry Huggins," he began. "I am your journal carrier. I deliver the journal to many of your neighbors. The Sunday supplement always has a good column about pets you might enjoy reading." Here he paused to catch his breath and try to think of what to say next. "Well, it's about time," said the lady with a smile. "I am Mrs. Peabody, and I have been waiting for you to come and sell me a subscription." "You have?" This possibility had never occurred to Henry. "Yes, I thought you might want to get credit for selling a subscription," answered Mrs. Peabody. "Oh, he does," Murph answered her earnestly. "It took you so long I was about to give up and phone the paper myself," Mrs. Peabody continued. "Please don't do that," said Henry, lest the lady change her mind about the subscription. "I won't," Mrs. Peabody answered him. "I have a grown son who used to deliver papers when he was your age, and I know all about it." Henry wondered if she really did know everything about a paper route. things like dogs who chased paper boys. Ranger, it seemed to him, was getting over his scare. He had poked his nose out from underneath the couch. "Now don't you worry about my dog," said the lady a second time. He felt he had to defend his property against intruders. "But now that he sees we are friends, he will be all right." She leaned over and spoke to her dog. "Won't you, Ranger baby?" Ranger peered out from under the couch and thumped his whip-like tail. "He's really just a lamb," said Ranger's owner. Some lamb, thought Henry, but he felt that he should try to make friends with Ranger. So he gave Ribsy another shove with his foot and said, "Hiya, Ranger. How's the fellow?" Ranger did not growl or bare his teeth. Well, that was progress. "Well, thanks a lot for the subscription and the candy apple," said Henry. "I'll start leaving the paper tomorrow." "Good," said Mrs. Peabody. "I've missed the crossword puzzle." She did not say one word about having the paper left in some special place, not a word about being careful not to hit the shrubs or the windows. Henry could tell this lady was going to be a good customer. Probably she would always be home when he came to collect and would always have the exact change ready. "Good night, Harry," the lady called after him. She was such a nice lady, Henry did not want to tell her his name was Henry, not Harry. "Well, what do you know?" Henry remarked to Murph when they were out on the sidewalk once more. "2 treats, a candy apple and a journal subscription." He felt as if a burden had been taken from him. He had actually sold a subscription, and now that he had sold one, he was sure he could sell others. From now on, it would be easy. Murph laughed. The way that old Ranger dived underneath that couch, he sure thought something was after him, but he didn't know what. Henry laughed too. He laughed at the thought of Ranger skidding on the floor. He laughed because he felt good. "I've had enough," said Murph. "Let's go home." "Not yet," said Henry, who no longer felt like he liked going home. "Just one more house." "What for?" asked Murph. "We have more junk than we can eat now." "Ah, come on, Murph," coaxed Henry. "Let's stop at Mr. Capper's. I'll bet he's giving something good." "You just want to tell him about the subscription," said Murph. "Yup," answered Henry. It was true. News like this could not wait until tomorrow. Now it would be safe for his father to talk to Mr. Capper, who would tell him Henry was a good salesman. There was no danger of his father telling him to tear the clubhouse now. "Oh," agreed Murph, and the boy. "Okay," agreed Murph, and the boy started towards Mr. Capper's house with the good news. So let's go through all the pictures. Okay, here's the picture of Henry in his Indian war paint. And here is the picture of Ribsy in his mask that makes him look like a wolf. And here is the picture of all the kids they were meeting on the way. And this is the pirate, Beezus, and little Ramona. And there are all their different costumes. That is a pretty big owl. And let me turn these pages. Here's the nice lady looking underneath the couch for the dog, who was all of a sudden pretty scared. And that is the end of chapter 3. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.